Recording in progress.
That'll get their attention. Okay, welcome to our meeting.
Hey, we're bonding over here.
I noticed.
You just relax.
It was Steve. He said, "Are you ready? I'm going to press the button." Okay, so I'm Kat. If you guys didn't meet me last time, I'm the president for this year. Yay, I'll tell you, it's not so hard. So if you want to be the president,
No, you're doing great.
next year it's your time to shine. Look at my bee mug, guys. Gorgeous. Okay. So tonight we're going to have our guest speaker, Bibbs, from the Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement District. He'll go first, and then we're going to have a PowerPoint for resources for successful and healthy bees. We'll talk about your membership and mentoring. It's kind of a repetitive thing. We're going to probably do that every time. Classes that you can take as a beekeeper, and then how to register your hives with the Mosquito Abatement District and UDAF. We'll talk about last month's review, which is the House Bill 297, and then around the apiary, kind of what you should be doing, pre-swarms, treatments, and then we'll have some announcements. And then there is a little dues form on your desk. If you guys have not paid your dues, please do that. And you just scan the code and it will lead you to the application. So this is Chris. You can come on over. It's now his turn to do his presentation.
Now, were we supposed to throw things at him because he like kills our bees?
Oh, careful, I'm good at catching.
Good at catching. I wouldn't throw anything. We might not get any more speakers to come.
I just want to harass you just a little bit.
Oh, that's fine. So, thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Christopher Bibbs. I'm the laboratory director at Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement. So for those that are unfamiliar with our district, we service the area that is really just centrally the Salt Lake City area, so it's not even necessarily all of Salt Lake County. Part of the reason for that is that all the different jurisdictions across the Central Valley have your own. So you've got South Salt Lake, you've got Magna, Tooele, Mosquito Abatement, Davis, Weaver. We're all border to border. We all work together. We talk to each other all the time. So even though I may be your representative from within Salt Lake City, that doesn't mean you don't have a mosquito control that does exactly the same thing that we do, just in your neck of the woods.
But they do the exact same thing.
Yes. So what I'm here to talk to you about is actually a collaborative thing that I've been doing. So my main job is actually to run the surveillance program and the applied research. And so one of my main goals within the applied research is to try to make our programs better. Try to make it so that we have fewer issues, it runs more cost effectively, find new technologies and things like that. I actually came from Florida, and so I worked in Florida for a long time, working in mosquito abatement and education, and particularly working in technology development. And I actually went into R&D within companies doing pesticide development specifically so that I could develop things that, one, help us with our problems that we have, because we have quite a few, and two, help ameliorate a lot of the issues we have with like environmental residue and things like that. And so this is actually kind of a carryover from my prior work with Florida that I've been able to execute out here. And so this has been a pretty interesting endeavor, but I really need to give you some background information so that what I'm going to talk to you about makes sense. So when we talk about mosquito control, really what we're emphasizing is female mosquitoes. And that matters because female mosquitoes need blood for their eggs, and that is the only reason that they need blood. Why does that matter? Well, that means that it isn't actually nutritive for them on the day-to-day. They spend most of their time on plants. They are pollinators too. Male mosquitoes, which don't need to bite at all, spend 100% of their time around plants and in gardens. And so this actually creates a unique issue for us because the only reason we care about them is because they bite. They bite, they pick up pathogens like West Nile virus or something and can carry it on to somebody else. But really this is a very limited slice of how they live in our environment. And so what I'm going to be focusing on today is that all mosquitoes, male or female, no matter what species, no matter what place in the world you live in, all mosquitoes need sugar. And they need it constantly, every day, just like us, multiple meals a day. And you can, if you pay attention, you might actually notice them hanging out on wildflowers or in your garden. There's lots of very small plants that they like, things like lantana or goldenrod. There's lots of like wildflowers we have, things like globe mallow and lots of roadside things. And that's actually like, oddly, it's something we don't interact with at all in mosquito control. Everything we deal with is primarily geared towards that blood feeding. Yeah, question?
How do I tell if it's a male or female?
Yeah, so good question. So male mosquitoes
Cause I'm not gonna squish the males, if they're alright, I'm gonna let them,
Yeah.
hey,
So-
so if the females bite me, I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
on the bottom right of this, you can see the male and female coupled together, and the first thing you should be able to see is the male is small. Part of the reason is that her body size is so that she can carry the eggs when she's ready, but probably the easiest to see aspect of them is their head is fluffy. Their antennae are like feathers, and they even have these little things that we call palpi, but it gives them like a fuzzy looking face. They have like these little mustaches. And so immediately they don't actually give you like that knee jerk, that's a mosquito. They don't quite look right. And so when you see them, you're like, well, you look really mosquito-like, but you look fuzzy. What's up with that? And those are just the male mosquitoes. And they look that way because they can't bite at all. So their mouth doesn't even work the same way. They couldn't bite you if they wanted to.
Okay, thanks.
On the same subject,
Yeah.
is it just the females that make the buzzing sound and the males don't?
They both do.
Okay.
Not part of this presentation, but interestingly, they have their own millihertz frequencies, and they find each other by those frequencies. So when they're flying around, they can key in on the correct males and females because they're matching their frequencies. It's also part of their courtship. When they couple together, they mellow out each other's frequencies and they match, they harmonize with each other before they couple together. So they actually have some pretty interesting acoustics and stuff, not unlike bees.
Can you tell the difference between male and female by the buzz?
You can,
No,
yeah.
can you?
Yeah, so
Really? Okay.
males are
So you can
typically
learn.
higher pitched, yeah. So they'll run 20 to 30 hertz higher. So yeah, it's noticeable. Like once you hear the difference, you'd be able to tell. So what we're really looking at here is that flower dependency. And these are all plants that we have here in our metro and all in our like ecotones and green spaces. We have both invasives and natives, so you have things like dogbane, Rocky Mountain bee plant, but you also have things we don't want, like white top and tamarisk. And the mosquitoes would use all of these things. And they use these things a lot like a corridor. And one of the really interesting aspects of their ecology is, although they are kind of primarily a pollinator, they don't have to be. You know, they have that little stabbing mouth part, but they can cheat. They can do this thing where they stab through the side of the flower, harvest the nectar off without actually climbing in and collecting the pollen. So even to a plant, they can be a pest. So this is actually something that gave us our bright idea. We know that they look for the flowers, and they'll look for them just about anywhere. They look for them in your garden, they look for them out in the wetlands, they look for them in roadside, wildflower areas and things like that. But because they don't actually have to climb into the flower, we may actually be able to take advantage of that in a way that doesn't have to interact with things like bees, butterflies, beetles, and whatnot. And so I got with a friend of mine that was in the University of Central Florida, and he's a biomaterial science engineer. If you've ever met a material science engineer, these are like the weirdest people you've ever met, because they're like chemists and physicists and biologists and stuff, and they've decided that they're just going to be like tinkerers for life. And so one of the things that he originally did is he worked on wound healing. He looked at, if somebody needed a skin graft or something like that, how do you replace that skin tissue? What if the person is so badly harmed, like a full body burn victim? What if they don't have skin to donate? So he actually used to work on like synthetic skin for wound healing. And we got to talking, and I was like, if it really is like human skin, I bet you a mosquito would bite it. And he got this idea, like, all right, fine, let's try that. And so he made these like little kind of fake skin gelatin blocks, and he initially loaded them up with blood, and they took. The mosquitoes actually did like them. They bit into them the same way they would you, and they fed off of it successfully. And so I know that doesn't like sound super amazing, but one of the things, because at the end of the day, it's just biting something, right? Just like it bites us. But one of the things as a scientist that makes this really nice is that means you can study how a bite happens without a volunteer. You don't need a person or an animal to be involved in this process. So already, before we even get into my side of the equation, we're talking about something that very much changes the way we do our research, because we're talking about something that harms you. And now I don't have to harm anybody in order to work with it. But what I wanted to do with it is I wanted to stick nectar into it. And the first thing we wanted to look at is, so this guy, he's a skin biologist basically. One of the things about that is your skin has capillaries. Those capillaries have blood. He can make these little tissue blocks with those same capillaries. And one of the things that's really special about this, because he's a material science engineer, and as far as I'm concerned, that's magic. So he can control the size, density, and length of those capillaries. So he can actually make many different types of tissues, and he can change how densely vascularized it is. That's where we're starting to hit the money. We might be able to engineer something that only a mosquito can get into, and that would be really nice. And so these are dubbed capillary alginate gels. We could just call them cap gels for short. And they can, theoretically, be filled with any liquid. And although he had tested them with blood, we were really looking at this for sugar baits. We're looking at this for a fake flower, basically. So think of this, I know it doesn't look like it, but think of this like a fake nectary from a flower. So, there's a few things that go into this. So first we have to do proof of concept. We have to figure out if this actually does what it's supposed to do. And with blood, that's one thing, but one of the ways we need to look at this isn't just, pass fail, did it, blow up its body with the food that it ate or whatever. We need to video them. We need to look at how they land, how they interact, what do they do when they find it, how do they investigate. And so we have this really elaborate setup with what is basically an endoscope camera. And we have this in the cage with the little synthetic gel block so that we can look at them. And so, this might be a little stuttery, but we have a few different examples of what's going on here. So from left to right, we have decreasing sizes or diameters of the capillaries, so smaller and smaller capillaries. Why does that matter? Well, their mouth is a certain width. That width probably has limits as to what it can get into. They're not really like rippers and shredders. I don't know how many of you guys have been bit by like horseflies or something like that, but that's like a little pocket knife. They hit you and they just chisel into your skin, then you pull blood and they drink that. That is not how a mosquito eats at all. So we needed to find the capillary range that actually works with their biology. And so what you're seeing up on the top is a few different representative examples of how they interact with the gel, and they correspond to the sizes that we're looking at. And I apologize that this is a little stuttery for this presentation, but basically you can see from the crowding where the interest is. So the larger the capillaries are, the more they really want to get into it. They still like the mid-range, so we're talking about like 30 to 35 micron. That's about the width of hair follicles. When you get really low, 10 micron, like a third the width of hair or a fourth of the width of hair, they actually can't get into it. So they sit there like nudging on it and pushing on it, but they can't actually get their little proboscis in there.
So they can tell that the material's inside, they just can't get to it.
Right, and so you see them like fussing with it. They push on it, they'll like kind of jump on it and things like that, and they can't really get the food out. And so we did figure out that if you do this right, you can make it exclusionary. If we can exclude a mosquito, we can exclude other things too. And so from there, what we really wanted to focus on is how well they feed across this range, because we want to go as small as possible. So I know this is a lot of bars. What I really want you to look at though is that what we have is 3 groupings of mosquitoes. And I don't know if I got it. You can kind of see my cursor here. So Culex pipiens, that is a West Nile vector. We have a lot of those here. In the middle here, we have Anopheles quadrimaculatus. That is a malaria vector. It is native to the US, so we do have it here. And on the far side, we actually have something special. I didn't really talk about it, but this guy is Toxorhynchides rurulus septentrionalis. They are not a biter at all, but they are a mosquito. So they're my special outgroup. They're my bridge on the way to bees. So they only pollinate, which means that even though they are a mosquito, I don't want to kill them because they don't do anything bad to anybody. And so across these 3 species, we can look at the range of capillary sizes. And so from left to right, we're getting smaller as you go right. And what I want you to immediately notice is that for the West Nile vector and for the malaria vector, it's kind of about the same, right? Like they feed on all of them. Whereas you get into this one that we know to be just a pollinator, and it starts to cliff off pretty dramatically. It is clearly not feeding as well from those blocks. All right, we got something, because I don't want to kill that one, but it is a mosquito. So it has all of the requisite biology aspects, but if I can make this in a way that even they can't get into it, then I'm betting that other things can't get into it too. So we escalated this, and this is where you guys came in. So obviously, I'm a mosquito guy, so I don't really sit around raising bees, even though I know a fair bit about them. I don't have any apicultural experience whatsoever. So I had reached out to the Wasatch Beekeepers Association to get a loan, I guess, air quotes, loan of bees. It's not like anybody's getting those back really, but the goal was to try to introduce these little gels with pesticide in them, in the presence of bees, to make absolutely sure. So we gave the bees plenty of opportunity with these gels to see exactly what they would do. And they do a lot of interesting things. So in these panels, on the upper left, well actually in most of these, you'll see like this kind of dark square. It's a blue dye. That is our little gel. And the little yellow cotton ball that's pulled out, that's just a cotton ball with honey in it. And we wanted to see how it compared. And what we found very consistently is the bees very much ignored the gel. They know it's there. Sometimes they pick at it, they kind of fidget at it and things like that, but they really weren't that interested in it. And so I started tampering with what we put into the gel. And when I did things like putting honey into it or a really, really high amount of table sugar, like 40%, then they started getting into it. And so this top right one is actually when they finally became interested in it. That was about 40% sucrose, which is way more than I need for a mosquito. Mosquitoes only need like 3 to 10. So I don't need to go this high for mosquitoes. But what was funny is you could see it's like fussing with it. You know, it's messing with it, it's licking it, it's pushing on it. I don't have it up here, but I have lots and lots of pictures and videos of them like crowding on it, and you see them like standing on it, almost like a little goat or something, and they're just like kind of pushing on it as bees do, because they're like pets basically. And they really were having a hard time getting into it. Every once in a while, I'd have one like literally just rip it off and just like tear it off of the thing it was on, but that was pretty rare. And so this was a pretty good visual sign. You know, this isn't data in front of you, but this was a really good visual that they actually were struggling to get into these. And in fact, if you were using it geared for mosquitoes, they probably weren't even interested in it at all. So when we look at the bee feeding, I needed to break this down in a few ways. And I don't know what your guys' experience is with trying to bring bees inside and have them do something for you, but they don't really like to do that. So I had to kind of fuss around with this process a little bit. So this is all bee data, but we have 10% sucrose, 40% sucrose, and 50% honey. And the reason I did that is because there was a really large amount of starvation mortality when I used 10% sucrose. It just really wasn't good enough. And it doesn't mean that 10% sucrose isn't nutritious on its own, but when I gave it to them with the gel, they couldn't get enough of it for it to matter. However, when you start ramping it up to like the 40% sucrose or with the honey, they start surviving pretty well. And so the dark black bar is with the gel, and the gray bar is with the cotton, which they should be able to just get into and chew on. And that, for me, was a really good sign, because like I said, I don't need to go above 10%. So if I can use this gel with these restrictive capillaries with a low amount of sugar, I can set this up in a way that the bee shouldn't really be able to get into it. So,
Is it that they can't get into it, or it's that it's not motivating enough to get into it?
both. Yeah, so I don't have all the data for you, but I did a lot of different pairwise comparisons of this. So I have some where I give them only the treatment. I have some where I give them only water, nothing else. I have some where I give them just the sucrose but no pesticide. I have some where I give them the option of all three and different combinations of 1 and 2. And so when you compare kind of what happens across the board, generally the trend is, you know, whatever group had just water and they just straight up starve, that mirrors pretty well to when you give them the 10% plus the pesticide. So for whatever reason it seems unappealing. It could be they can detect it and they don't want. Right, yes, and bees actually have really, really good chemical senses. So most pesticides, they can actually tell that they're in there. In this case, that's good, because if it means that they don't want to touch it, then that's great, because it means they won't be bringing it back to the hive. Now, what do I put in the gel? You know, I've already shown that they can fiddle with it, but that if I do it right, it can be very geared towards mosquitoes. So one of the things I've actually been working on prior to this gel was the developing of the formula, the pesticide that goes into it. Now, I'm actually a toxicologist, so this is my bread and butter. Wouldn't you know it, artificial sweeteners turn out to be highly fatal to bugs.
Humans too.
In high enough doses, yeah. So you may even have experience with that. I don't know how many of you guys have like eaten a whole bunch of erythritol or allulose or something like that, but you might get some stomach upset from that, and you get really bad gastro distress. That's because it causes a really rapid fermentation. And that's one thing for us, but if a mosquito does it, the bud explodes and they die. So it actually works out really well in our favor, because this is a very highly biodegradable, FDA-approved, consumable by humans. It's not particularly dangerous, and it is in fact naturally found. I know a lot of people don't realize that, but these artificial sweeteners come from somewhere. How many of you guys garden? Got any fruit trees?
Yeah.
You know what happens when you get that cold snap and it makes the fruit nice and sweet? Alcohols don't freeze. Erythritol, anything with all, isopropanol, ethanol, methanol, erythritol, xylitol, they are alcohols. The plant converted the sugar into the alcohol so it wouldn't freeze and get freeze damage. You take a bite, it tastes sweet. So that's why the adage comes about that, yeah, you get a nice cold snap and it makes your apples nice and sweet. That's why. So you do actually find this stuff in nature, just not the amount that we're using it. So I've been playing with this for a while and have figured out that it does actually work pretty well with mosquitoes. And so that's actually what we were moving forward with, along with some combinations of some essential oils and stuff. And you know, for a lot of pesticide industry, essential oils don't really have like the heavy hitting effect that we really need them to. There's some limited cases, but like if we're talking about mosquito control as like a big industry or whatever, you're not going to see these essential oils replacing a lot of the really big interventions we have to do. You know, if we had to deal with West Nile or something like that, they're not going to resort to this. But it doesn't mean that I can't use them for this, because it's a little different. So when you combine these sugar alcohols with other stuff, you know, clove oils or patchouli, cedarwood or whatever, you can find some combinations that work quite well. And so that's what we're using here when I used the formula. So now what we're looking at is the pesticidal formula. And we're using the sugar alcohols with some of these essential oils and nothing else. And it's in only these cap gels. We can actually see some pretty good effect. And this is kind of a complicated set of graphs because I got not only our pest species on the left, and then our pollinating mosquito in the middle, and then bees on the right. I have a lot of different treatments. And I mentioned that I had like starvation ones, and I had ones that I gave only the treatment and they couldn't they couldn't avoid it and stuff. So what I did is I highlighted the ones that are going to be the most relevant. So for the pest mosquitoes, you know, if it's control, which is CTRL, that is just sugar water. And the reason you do that is to make sure that the way I'm handling them doesn't kill the mosquitoes, because I don't want a false positive. The starvation control is meant to see what happens when they just refuse to eat the food, so that I don't accidentally get a false reading from that. Do they die because they just don't want to eat, and so they'd rather starve than eat the pesticide? Because I want the pest mosquitoes to eat it. Now those are also the same in the Toxoplasmosis and the honeybees. But those non-targets also have a no-choice set where they have a pesticide-laced gel and no options, not even water. The only liquid they have access to has pesticide in it. I want you to look at, see if I can. Yeah, so if you compare it to like the starvation versus the no-choice for both of these, they're real similar, aren't they? So that would insinuate in this case that they can in fact tell that there's a pesticide in there, and they would rather not eat it at all and die from starvation than necessarily, you know, pick it up. Now, so these others, I got these treatment ones in the red. So I got a few different groups. So treat plus, that is honey with pesticide. Treat minus is just 10% sucrose with the pesticide. Treat 40 is 40% sucrose with the pesticide. And with our pollinating mosquito here, they don't particularly die. It comes out about the same as our just like little control here. So that's good. And then you get into the bees. The bees, if you do the treatments out here, you get some different results depending on how much sugar you make available. So in their case, it very much depended on what the food was that you offered. That's good information, because if I'm going to formulate this pesticide, then I can cherry pick what liquids I put in there, and I can pick the thing they don't really like as much. So in this case, if I paired it with honey, it ended up being fairly effective. If I did the, I lost my cursor here. If I did the treat minus, which is just a 10% sucrose, you have a little bit of mortality, and the treat 40, you have a little bit of mortality. But in either case, it's still not as high as if they just chose to starve to death. So I'm actually really optimistic about them. I know a few of them died, but I mean, what you don't want to see is you don't want to see the honeybees dying to like the same extent as the mosquitoes, and they're not. In fact, it's much, much less. And if you use it right, it can be less than even 10%, less than even 5% of the bees that had exposure to it. Now these cages are set up with hundreds of bees. So like there's a pretty good head count going on. So the odds of some of them dying should be reasonably high. But I'm pretty happy about this, because what this is showing is that we're on the right track. We're starting to see that the bees can be selected out. You can actually do something where it's really primarily geared towards the mosquito. So my final takeaways from this is that I think the capillary approach, physically excluding the other pests, it seems to be working. And when you pair it correctly with the right pesticides, things that are pretty friendly, biodegradable, and the liquids, sugars, and stuff in a way that isn't particularly palatable to bees, you can do something that isn't very like harmful or risky with your honeybees. And so that is what I'm going for here. Oh, yeah, so I add these little things here. So that's pretty much my takeaways here.
Birth control, couldn't you just put birth control in the jail?
Funny you say that. So mosquitoes do have birth control. There's this stuff called juvenile hormone mimic. We actually use this stuff, a product called Aldacid. If you guys go to the store and you get Amdro mosquito bombs, they're like these black charcoal, packs. They're usually for water. That actually, yeah, that's actually mosquito birth control. So if you give that to an adult mosquito, it functions exactly like birth control. If you give it to a young mosquito, then they never become an adult. So we can do that. I haven't tried it. But yeah, that's absolutely a thing we can do. So I don't want to chew up too much of your time, but I at least wanted to give a shout out to some of the groups involved. So this actually was funded work. We were doing this in part of a collaboration with CDC called the Public Health Entomology for All Initiative, as well as the American Mosquito Control Association. So we are part of a larger national network of mosquito control agencies. So this was actually funded at the national level because that's how interesting it is to the mosquito community at large.
So all your money been pulled now, though?
Well, for AMCA, no, because that's donor-led. So a lot of the other mosquito control districts like us or private groups that are interested, like Gates Foundation and stuff, may actually donate money for that. So it is not federally contingent at all. The Public Health Entomology for All, that is done. But, you win some, you lose some. Anyway, I am a mosquito control person in general. So even though I talked your ear off about stuff that you've probably never seen before, I am happy to answer anything related to anything with mosquitoes or mosquito control.
So what are they doing right now? Because it seems they just spray. Spray.
Yeah, so I'm going to explain the overall architecture of stuff. So we have two huge components that go into our operations. We have larvicides, and we have adulticides. Larvicides go in water. That presents a whole host of its own problems because water is very sensitive. So larvicides only have things that we call biorationals. So one of those is Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, we call it BTI for short. It's a bacteria. It is an alkaline activated bacteria that must be eaten to work. So it's weird. It's a very weird bacteria, but it works super well in mosquitoes, and it is not particularly harmful to fish, crustaceans, or various other things. Because it's a naturally occurring bacteria, it doesn't last very long. So the downside to using something like that is you're going out constantly. You go out, spray more. But
Oh, and it's a spray.
it is,
And you
yes.
spray it on water.
Yes, you do. And we can do it through lots of things, handheld equipment. We have like truck-mounted equipment as well as airplanes and stuff that can fly over. Any of those can use that material. You guys, as a bystander, wouldn't be able to tell the difference because you would just see a liquid coming out of it, so you wouldn't really know. But we know from our end, we can choose what we load into the machine. As far as some of the others, one is that mosquito birth control, as we called it, the juvenile hormone mimic. That is another larvicide that we use.
A
So
spray, also spray?
yes, it can be liquid or solid, but we do frequently use liquids. And so those two are what goes in the water. And neither of them have any contraindications with crawfish or other insects, fish, our drinking water. Like it's actually approved federally for drinking water. Here in the state of Utah, we have what's called Class 1 water. So any of the water that comes out of like say Albion or something like that, that would be Class 1 or culinary water. Those two things, the larvicides, can be used in the culinary water, that's a pretty high bar to be able to pass. Now for the adulticides come in basically a couple varieties. One is pyrethroids, which is originally a chrysanthemum extract, but you guys will probably have seen pyrethroids in pretty much everything. You go to a big box store like Home Depot, most pesticides you get off the shelf are going to have a pyrethroid. I'll give you a tip. If it has furin in the name, it's pyrethroid. Pyrethrin, permethrin, alethrin, transfluthrin, lambda-cyhalothrin, all of those. If it's furin, it's a pyrethroid. Matters for your bees and stuff too, because you get pests and things, because you can get resistance to those, and that's actually one of the things that we're dealing with mosquitoes, is that they have become resistant to those pyrethroids, anything with furin in the name, and it's becoming kind of worthless to use them. The other things that we use are called organophosphates. They're very old. Organophosphates have far predated pyrethroids. There are very few left on the market today. The main three that you're going to see is chlorpyrifos, malathion, and nalin. Or dibrome is another name that it comes by. Usually what the bee communities get up in arms about is actually dibrome, just one of the three. Malathion is one that sometimes even beekeepers use. I don't really recommend it, but I know people that get like super upset about like lesser hive beetles and stuff like that, and we'll go after them with stuff like Malathion. You don't really have to do that, but we don't really use those in mosquito control much either because they're really old, and they've technically survived EPA registration, but it's not without some baggage. You know, they got some concerns and stuff that we have to work around, so we tend not to use them very much. We do use nail it a lot, and there is a reason. It is very, very, very like photolabile, meaning that it breaks down in sunlight. So if you get the morning daybreak come over it, it lasts like 15 minutes and it's gone. So if you use it right, and that's the caveat, if you use it right, it shouldn't hurt anything. You can use it wrong, and there are certainly examples of people using it wrong. If you guys have been doing this a while, you might have heard about South Carolina bee kill that was a few years ago. It was pretty significant. It was many hundreds of thousands of bees, many hives that were impacted by that, and it's because they flew their craft during the day to spread. And they're not supposed to do that. And that director was put on the spot, like AMCA, my parent organization, like cornered him and was like, why did you do that? Like, that isn't our best practices at all. And he just kind of shrugged and was like, it's a mistake. It's like, so like, that is not okay within our industry.
And it was ineffective, right? Because it would.
Correct. Yeah. Mosquitoes are typically not diurnal. There's a couple examples that are contrarian to that, but all the ones that carry diseases and stuff, nighttime. There is no reason at all.
Spray right after dusk?
Typically, about an hour after dusk. Yeah.
By breakfast time, it's
Yes.
been.
That is the intent, yeah. Now, one of the other constraints with how we use our pesticides is that we can get into public lands. So I can go into Audubon lands, I can go into state park lands, I can go into the wetlands around the Great Salt Lake. That inherently means that I have access to property that is way more sensitive than your guys' backyard property. The regulations correspondingly reflect that. So they are very, very stringent about what we take out there. So although there have been bee kills because of irresponsible use for nail it does still pass the test for things like environmental residues, water contamination, various other things. It doesn't mean there's zero risk. There's not zero risk. Just that compared to other things that are on the market, it is considered acceptable by EPA. So that's kind of what we're left with right now. In comparison, agriculture has about 46 classes of insecticides. So we mentioned pyrethroids and organophosphates, that is 2. Add another 40 to that, and agriculture has that many more options than we do. So
It sounds like mosquito abatement is the least of our problems.
It's our neighbors that are killing our
honestly,
bees.
even we have issues with it. So like, because we share a lot of some of the same pesticides, pyrethroids being an example, like agriculture, gardens and stuff, they use pyrethroids too. Like home pest control, termites, roaches, fleas, lice, they all use pyrethroids. So there have actually been demonstrable case studies where a district has not at all used a pesticide in an area, but they went through and they checked to see if they have like resistance to it, and they do, even though that district does not use those pesticides. Well, it doesn't matter if we use them or not. It matters if the mosquito runs into it. They don't care.
So they're getting resistance from agricultural use?
Yes, and so we have a lot of runoff issues with that. We call it treatment dilution effect. You get the same thing with herbicides. You may have heard stuff about that where people go and they use things like Roundup Ready crops or dicamba resistant crops, and then they run a crop duster over and they spray herbicides because the plant has been engineered to not die under the herbicide. What if your neighboring farmer doesn't use a Roundup Ready crop? What if they're an organic farmer or something like that? Then it just drifts over and kills all their crop too. And so we actually have that problem a lot with mosquitoes. So ironically, even within a pesticide using industry, we butt heads with other pesticide users because we're trying to be responsible about it, and everybody sort of has their own strategies for how they do this. So mosquitoes have wings, they fly. So all these like alfalfa fields and hay fields and various other things, pasture land and whatever, mosquitoes use all of it. I only have access to what I have access to, but they can fly wherever they want. And so if they run into an alfalfa field that's been treated with something or whatever, they're kind of being like pre-selected for that stuff before I ever touch them, which is frustrating. Which is why I'm working on these cap gels and stuff, and why I'm trying to work on weird insecticides like the artificial sweeteners and stuff, because that isn't used by other industries. I
We
mean,
should
food
make
and stuff.
cap gel clothing. I lived in Alaska for 4 years, and the mosquitoes just eat us alive.
Yeah.
There's just not enough blood for everybody.
Yeah.
Can you work on mites next? Rural mites?
Yeah. So.
Get
Like
on that.
mosquitoes in Alaska, just fun fact, did you know that the Great Caribou migrations across Canada are triggered by mosquitoes? So they actually survive the freeze and the permafrost. And so it gets just warm enough, June-ish, for everything to come out. And instead of having like, oh, we only have a few mosquitoes because it's cold all year round. No, you have the entire year's worth of mosquitoes in like an hour.
That's how it feels.
So,
Like, keep your kids inside.
right. And so like, these aren't like the most populated areas, so they go after wildlife just as much. And so the Great Caribou migrations typically start on the eastern front and they start to head westward towards Alaska. And so that is actually why they're triggered, is biting flies, things like mosquitoes. That's it's pretty amazing. And like, honestly, back in the day, you know, I'm talking like 100 years ago, the US was like that too. And so there were actually old reports, like USDA reports and stuff, of cattle suffocating to death because there were so many mosquitoes. Every time they tried to breathe, they inhaled them and then they would choke on them and die in the field. You'd
Well,
have,
we had it good in Alaska.
yeah, there's a lot of things in like Texas and stuff like that. The old USDA reports and stuff, you know, horses and stuff, like look like they've been mummified in the field because they've been bit so much they lost too much blood. So we do not live in that kind of time right now. So, you know, I realize that mosquito control has its sordid aspects of history, but there is a reason that this stuff was done. But, you know, that's a whole other history. Yeah.
So if you divided up the city or the county into areas, where are the mosquito problems? Where do you treat?
Yeah, so we treat exclusively on the western front. So all of that floodplain that approaches the Great Salt Lake is where all of our mosquitoes come from. What happens is they actually migrate in. So when we get the snow melt in the spring, it eventually hits the canals and it funnels out towards the Great Salt Lake, but it starts to flood things, and then all those mosquitoes hatch. Then for the rest of the summer, we're fighting them as they're slowly like inching their way towards the city. So we're doing everything we can to keep them from reaching the city. Even if they reach the city, in our district's case, we don't spray the city. That doesn't mean you don't see us. You do. We do other things. We have like a fish control program that we do. We have some of those larvicides that we do, but we don't do like the plane sprays. We don't do truck sprays or anything like that.
So you're like putting guppies in ponds and stuff like that?
Yes, yeah. And that has some disadvantages, you know, because it means that by the time you guys are being bit, it's kind of too late. Like we're kind of beyond the point that we can do much about it because they've already reached, and we've been fighting the whole summer to keep them from getting it.
When you say they've reached, so starting out at the lake, are you talking about, what's the range of a mosquito?
The ones that we work with, anywhere from 15 to 30 miles. So they can actually make it to Park City if we don't
But,
figure
so
out.
are you talking that they are born at the lake and fly into the city, or are you talking that they are born and will move a mile or two and another generation will pass and those will move a mile or two?
Both. So they have, you could think of like a foraging
What's
range.
their lifespan?
That's what mine is.
Couple weeks, typically.
6 weeks?
They can hit that 30 miles in like 3 days.
Oh,
So if you don't do anything about
so
them, they'll
they
reach.
can fly all
Yes.
the way in from the lake.
So they try to make it as far as they can, but if they get stopped for whatever reason, which can be like by weather and
So
stuff as well.
a good wind. If you
Yes,
smell it, they're on,
yes, and that absolutely happens.
Zombie apocalyptic.
We've had,
no, some nights you can smell the lake
Yes.
from the
Yeah,
town.
so we've had like some stormy falls, you know, the last couple of years.
I know.
You know, it's kind of blown some of them in and they catch wind of it, so yeah, it absolutely causes problems with it, but,
But are they're not necessarily like trying to get, they're not like out at the Salt Lake and going, oh, let's head east, that's where all the delicious people are.
you'd be surprised. So you wanna know what they smell?
It's none.
Do they?
They smell carbon dioxide, right.
Oh, yeah.
What do you not have a lot of out on the lake with no buildings and people?
In cars.
So they are immediately heading for the city structure because it's a huge amount of CO2. Now, when they get in the city, finding you is a different story. They need to use their eyes and stuff. But from that far away, they know city has food. And
I
so they're
thought
gonna
they
do it.
liked bananas.
That's complicated.
When
Let
we
me
went
get
to
your question.
Alaska, we didn't eat bananas because
What,
It was
what
supposed to
eats
keep the
mosquitoes, or
mosquitoes
does
away.
have any effect on the dead mosquitoes that are killed as opposed to the higher bugs that eat the bugs?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I was looking at that Toxorhynchitis mosquito is because when they are larvae, they are cannibals. So they actually kill and eat other mosquitoes, which makes them a good guy. There's dragonflies, they're both as larvae and adults, so both in water and in air, they'll eat mosquitoes. There's a smattering of other like predaceous insects and things, but honestly, once a mosquito gets to be an adult, there aren't a ton of things they go after. There are things that eat it,
Mhm.
but when you consider how many billions of them there are out there, it's
Right.
just not enough to really hurt it. Now, in the water, there's a ton of stuff that eats in the water. Every frog, fish, and other bug is going to go after a mosquito larvae. So if it's healthy water,
Mhm.
and you see like birds in there and stuff like that, you're good. It's fine. That's not all water though. You know, there's a lot of pretty rank water out there, and the mosquito's fine with that. But like your turtles and fish and frogs are not okay with that, and so that's when we have to intervene.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I got a couple of things. Since mosquitoes, you said, are pollinators,
Mhm.
and we don't want to kill all of them then, I assume, what's the ultimate goal of mosquito abatement and what you're working on to kill some of them? What's the goal you're working at?
Yeah. So my district is 100 years old. We were founded in about 1924-ish. We were the third oldest mosquito control in the U.S., with the first being New Jersey, second being California. That's pretty significant. We were founded for the nuisance, so people just being bit. But since then, we've learned that the bigger risk is actually the viruses they carry. And back then, it was things like Western equine encephalitis, triple E, California encephalitis virus, and now we have things like West Nile encephalitis. These are not curable. You get these, you have them for life. They have a certain percentage of them that are fatal. So like Eastern equine encephalitis or St. Louis encephalitis have like a 30% fatality rate. That is not a it's not a gamble you want to take. So it's one of those things, it's like being struck by lightning. You know, it's horrifying, also oddly personal. You know, it feels like you were like targeted for whatever reason. So our emphasis has shifted from, you know, make America livable by eliminating the mosquitoes. We now know that that's essentially impossible. There are so many of them, they reproduce so quickly, they co-habitate with just about anything. We cannot eliminate them. We've tried through the 100 years of trying to do it. So instead, the gears have shifted to, can we interfere with them enough that you don't get sick? And that we can do. And so we can show very demonstrable epidemiological impacts where we can prevent malaria and West Nile and triple E, dog heartworm, and things like that if you do things right. And so that is our goal. That's our end game, is that I'm not worried about getting rid of all of them. I just need to disrupt them enough that for the period of time we have to worry about getting sick, that you don't have to worry about getting sick. And that is every mosquito control's goal in the US now, is we prioritize vectors and the viruses that they carry. Typically viruses for us, but in a global sense, there's other things too.
So the nuisance of getting bit being lessened is side benefit.
Yes. Now, of course, people call us about that. You know, there's like, my dog just got carried away, like, you got to do something about this. So, like, we do try to help and stuff, but the goal is the virus. So we kind of stay our hand a little bit if we feel like, well, I know it sucks, but like, you can probably live with it a little. But if we're dealing with like West Nile or something, we're going to be right out there.
What about all those plants, the citronelles or whatever,
Yeah, they're okay.
wormwood,
Yeah, so
do any of them do anything?
as with anything, you know, mosquitoes have their preferences. They don't really prefer those plants. So the adage had come about that if you have these in your garden, that you won't get mosquitoes. Well, they don't have to touch them. So, I mean, just because they're not hanging out in your garden doesn't mean they don't hang out at your house or something. So there's like mixed results, you know, it doesn't mean they do nothing.
They're
I don't
just
know how many of you
less
guys work-
attractive. They're not attractive enough.
Right, so how
But the
do,
plant right next to them is, so.
Yeah.
how many of you guys have experience with poison ivy? Do you have any experience touching poison ivy but not getting the rash?
We don't touch it.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
It's
Not
all
enough
one side,
times.
right?
So personal resistance could be that, but the bigger reason is the plant doesn't always have the compound. If you see spring growth and the poison ivy's red, or if it has flowers, it's got a lot of poison in it. If you don't hurt the plant, you don't break it, you don't stomp on it, it won't get oil on you, and you won't get the poison. It's the same with the mosquito. You may have a lavender plant, and the lavender's real smelly, but where's all the lavender oil? It's inside the plant. So actually, you'd have to go like snap your lavender to get it out and about and stuff so that it gets rid of the mosquitoes. Are you going to actively do that? Go like rough up your dill so that it chases out the mosquitoes? You know, most people don't do that. So that's the caveat there. It doesn't mean there's nothing there, but it means that in the way we live our lives,
It makes you feel better.
yeah, that's really kind of what it is. It's a feel-good thing.
What about all those supersonic vibration things?
Those do nothing.
You're just giving your money away, huh?
They cover
Yeah.
the sound of the mosquito because they're making more.
So you guys know about bats, right? Echolocation. That's exactly how those devices work. Sound is a wave, just like with bees. You guys know bees dance, right?
Yes.
Bees can't hear each other if they're not standing on something. That vibration needs to move through the surface. Mosquitoes fly. So just like a bee, they don't actually hear a whole lot when they're like up in the air and stuff. Now maybe if they were sitting on something, that's a different story. So there are some devices that you can use in water, and it's like a sonar ping.
Or
And
your picnic table, maybe.
yeah, and if you can get a physical contact with them, sure. But that's not going to be the majority of the case, and certainly with these ones like, oh yeah, sonic buzz off, like, you know, creates a sound wave they don't like or whatever. You can avoid a sound you don't like, right? So can they. It's not actually going to like keep them away. They're just going to find some creative way to get around you. There's actually a thing with that, just like light creates shadow, sound creates shadow. So light is a wave.
So they'll just bite you on the side opposite from
Yes,
the noise?
they absolutely do that. You know, you have the device on your table, they just bite your back.
Yeah.
Because it's not going through you, you know, it's got to go around you.
Doesn't go around.
I have some questions. So,
Sure.
how do you know how many larvae or eggs, I guess, mosquitoes lay?
Yes,
Per-
so for our pestiferous mosquitoes, you're looking at around 9 to 1,200 eggs per adult. So if you have 1,000 mosquitoes out there and each one can lay another 1,000, that gets out of hand very fast. For our friendly ones, like the cannibal mosquitoes, like one a day. So
So they're
proportionately,
big.
yeah, the good guys always end up, you know, with fewer in their numbers. So even though they're very, very beneficial, you will never get as many of them as you get the others. So these pestiferous mosquitoes and the ones that carry viruses and stuff, if you don't do something about them early, they just take off, which is a lot like your Varroa treatments. It's the same thing. If you don't catch it early, you're going to spend the whole rest of the season playing catch up because they're just beating down your hive really bad. So you got to get them early. Same with the mosquitoes.
So then, I guess my other question is,
Speak up.
I forgot my question because he went on all these about how many eggs. Oh, how does a mosquito end up getting the disease or the virus? Is it like hereditary essentially? Like it keeps going through generations of it, or it bites someone and
Yeah.
they get it, or?
So there's 3 ways that a mosquito can be dangerous. You get something called horizontal transfer, that's an STD. You get something called vertical transfer, that's to the baby. And then you get an acquired pathogen or something, which is only from biting something. That something doesn't have to be you. So West Nile virus, for example, is actually in birds. So the Great Salt Lake is one of the most important bird flyways in the entire continent. This entire hemisphere, it is one of the most significant roosting spots, nesting spots, shorebirds, waterfowl, eared grebes, all of the like, and every single one of them could get West Nile virus. So they're all coming here. We actually have a superhighway of birds that come here, so the virus always ends up here. The mosquito picks it up from the bird, it gets infected, and then when it ends up biting you, you get infected.
Do they suffer symptoms from it?
They do. So not all of them can carry stuff. And so
Seems
when we,
fair.
yeah, right, yeah, so actually that's an arguing point I always have to give to people. They are not totally without like ill effects. Many times they die from the infection, and the ones that don't die,
Is
they're
this the
very ill.
mosquito or the bird? Who's
The mosquito.
dying? Oh, mosquito.
But birds as well. So like for example, in 2013, in the fall to winter, November-ish, we had a really big eared grebe die-off. We had about 20,000 birds die on the lake. We also had about 86 bald eagles die. And that was because West Nile had gotten into that population while they were out there, and it just spread like wildfire. Fast, like within days, they were just dropping dead. That's not good at all. So there were mosquitoes out there, and they were hopping around from bird to bird and just spreading across the birds. That ended up being a really, really significant event. We haven't had anything quite that bad since then, but clearly it can happen. It's exactly what happens with people as well. You know, they migrate in from the lake, but the lake has all these birds, they pick up the West Nile, they migrate in, they're already infected. So if they are strong enough to get to you, there's decent odds that they may have something. And so that's why we try so hard to keep them from getting to you guys.
So we should use our DEET at the.
Yes, absolutely. Your front line of defense as just a consumer is to have repellents of some kind. You know, honestly, like of course, use your EPA approved repellents. Use a repellent at all. Like it's better than nothing. If you don't like DEET, there's options. There's oil lemon eucalyptus, there's Shire 3535, there's other things. Just use a repellent of some kind, please, because something's better than nothing. Of course, there are like labeled and approved stuff, but I realize people have their preferences. Like DEET can cause inflammation on people. Some people, you put it on your kid, for example, and they just end up like beet red. So not everybody likes everything, that's totally fine.
We spray a lot of clothes.
It melts
That's
in
fine.
fishing gear.
Yeah, so it's solvent with plastics, so it'll like dissolve your watch bands and things like that, which is pretty frustrating.
So something interesting, I will try not to have more questions. I have not had like an allergy before to a mosquito in my life until like the last 2 years. And if I get bit by a mosquito, I get inflammation and it turns out to be like this huge and it burns and it itches.
Yeah.
But it's mainly just hot to touch and like it burns.
Yep.
Is the mosquito
It's weird to me. I don't know.
venom, I'm trying to remember the word, thermolabile? What's the, when it does
No.
break down under heat?
It's not venom at all. It is simply an immune reaction to their saliva. So there is no,
It's just filth?
yes, pretty
So
much.
why does that happen though? Like why does it get big and red now versus like when
Yeah,
I was a
so
little
it's an
kid?
infection.
you have a sensitization allergy that is caused by IgA, immunoglobulin A. There are 3 immunoglobulins that you have to worry about, IgG, IgA, IgE. When you have seasonal allergies, like pollen, tree pollen and stuff, that is IgE that does that. So if that runs in your family, you actually medically would have a high titer of IgE. IgA is a response mechanism. It means you've been bit a lot and your body's decided, I don't like this, and it starts to freak out over it. It can happen with bees as well. So if you get stung by
Doesn't happen
bees,
with bees.
you know, there's people that go the other way where they just desensitize, but then there's other people that go the other way where they just end up with like a big droopy giant thing on them after they got stung. It's called localized hyperedema. That is IgA. Same thing that made you welt up from the mosquito, it's gonna make you welt up from bees as well.
I need to use some DEET.
Yeah.
Just put something on it. What you just said. Okay, it's good to know because it never happened before and now it.
Yeah, which is also why we can't make a vaccine against a mosquito, because you can't really make a vaccine against spit.
What, I was in Alaska and they were selling these propane, mosquito things.
Yeah,
How does that, how do those work? Do you know?
Yeah, so like propane, heptane and stuff, what happens is you burn that off for your gas grill or something, and then one of the byproducts of that is CO2. So they work really well in those traps, but they are a lure. So the number one mistake that people make is, oh, that's cool, I got this trap, I'm gonna set it on my porch and turn it on. You brought them to your porch.
Right,
Go put it like
Go-
the back of the property.
go put it on North 40 to where,
Right.
where they.
Yeah, but they do work. We actually use some of those out of the prison. So we have like this perimeter belt that we do with them, and it's like hundreds of feet away from the prison, but we do that to try to stop them from getting into the prison, because the
Okay,
people who work there and stuff, they're literally in a cage, they can't go anywhere. So we like gotta do something there, so we actually use those.
I have a
so,
question.
so they actually work. I
Yes,
mean,
they do.
like when we was up in Alaska, those mosquitoes were pretty good size.
Yeah, they work, for better or worse.
They're bird size.
Yeah, yeah.
Will you talk about the prison for a second? Because I
Sure.
heard there's like you brought it up, so now. I have a
Yeah,
question.
so you guys probably know about the prison that was in Draper. That is the Utah State Penitentiary, or Utah State Correctional Facility, USCF. And that is a special incarceration facility. It doesn't belong to anybody, it's state. So it doesn't belong to Draper, it doesn't belong to Salt Lake County. So they had a really old facility in Draper, and they decided they needed to update it. Where do you buy land for something like a prison? So they had scoped out land and decided that there was a lot of free real estate right off of I-80, out near the wetland, and they was like, hey, this is empty, we'll do this. They did reach out to us, and they were like, hey, so we were looking at building out here, but we realized this is like not part of the major city structure. Do you think we're gonna have a problem? And we said, yes, you're gonna have a problem. Like, you're literally building it right where the mosquitoes live. Like, that's the worst place you could have picked. You're not only out in no man's land, but nobody can help you out there. And they're like, okay, cool, we'll take that under advisement. And they built it anyway. And they
Because
opened,
they already sold to developers in here.
pretty much. And so they had actually begun development in like 2018 or so. They started clearing them. I don't have it with me, but I have lots of like videos and stuff of like the progression of this stuff out there. One of the things they did is they clear out the land, and they were like piping water off the land, because when they're digging it out, they're excavating down to the water table, but they can't build in much, so they have to pipe the water out. So I had all these fields that were just flooded as far as you could see, because they were piping the water off of their build site, and so that created problems. Then when they finally got it up and going, then they had this building, they turned the lights on to like run everything, but nobody was there yet. So they just put this it's like a giant bug lamp, basically, sitting out in the marsh where there was otherwise not really any lights. And I don't know how many of you guys head out to Tooele early in the morning or late at night, you can see the prison.
You
Like,
can hit a lot of buttons.
yeah, it is so bright, like it's like staring at a mercury vapor light or something, just out in the wetland. You're like, what is that giant beacon? That's the prison. They have to keep the lights on 24/7 for safety. If it's lights out, then the guards can't see.
Because it's a prison.
Right, and so that means that they never ever get relief. They are like the beacon of civilization out there, which means the mosquitoes go to them first before everybody else. And so then after they started to move staff in there, the staff were so upset about the living conditions that they started quitting. So between the move being really far away and then just the really terrible like daily conditions of being around like all these biting flies and stuff day in, day out, they went from like what was supposed to be a staff load of like 500 some odd down to like 120. They have about 2,000 people incarcerated there, and 100 people is not enough to keep that place running. And so they've been hobbled for quite a while. They've been hiring back, but like, that's not something you fix in like a season, you know, that takes time to let
When
that
there's
happen.
that dust,
Yeah,
the mercury dust that.
yeah, it's gonna hit them first. So one of the things that we've been doing is they're not really like a tax-paying entity necessarily, like they don't pay us any money, but they're people, they live out there and stuff now. So we're trying to do what we can to help them. So we're actually starting a fish program on their premises where they actually do it as like an in-house like enrichment program. So they do it like a work study where they can learn aquaculture and stuff like that, but they raise these fish that then they then can use for mosquito control. They can stock ponds and stuff out in their area. In their case, it's the least chub. What we use is called the western mosquito fish called gambusia. But gambusia has been in use in biological control for like since the 1920s.
Why was that?
So the
Why that one?
Gambusia is an air-breathing guppy. So
will
if
they
you
live in standing water?
yes, if you put it in water that doesn't move, they will be okay, for the most part. Like within reason, you know. Obviously, if you've got like motor oil in the water, like they're still gonna die. But they do pretty well in the same environments that mosquitoes live in. Now the least chub is really similar, but it's native. The problem with the least chub is it's really sensitive to being handled. So if we raised it in the city and then we trucked it out to them, they'd actually die. So the reason we started the program with the prison is since if you're gonna live in the marsh anyway, then we might as well have you raise something that's useful and they don't have to drive anywhere. They can just take it and go put it in a pond or something like that. And for them, the least chub will work. And the upshot is it's a native and we're helping like conserve something that, the least chub, I don't know if you guys know about like fish and aquaculture and fish stocking here, but they do a lot of like pond stocking with trout, rainbow trout and stuff here. It's absolutely decimated a lot of the local small species, like the least chub is just like the size of your thumb, it's not very big. So it gets eaten by other stuff. So it's actually been like on the edge of conservation status for a while, like it's not endangered, but it's like, oh yeah, just a little tip, and it could be, you know, threatened or something. So we're hoping that by doing something like that, it can kind of stave that off a little, because those little fish are the ones that eat the mosquitoes. They didn't the trout. Like, I don't know if you ever looked at a trout mouth, they got teeth. Like, that teeth are not for biting mosquitoes, you know?
Just by stocking a pond, they can actually make a dent in all that huge amount of mosquitoes?
Yes, they can. So they are so voracious. They typically eat more than 100 times their own body weight for the duration of their lifespan. So if you have hundreds of guppies out there or something, and yeah, mosquitoes don't have a chance. So it becomes more of a reach thing rather than an effectiveness thing. Like the fish are effective, you just have to get them into the pond. So if there's a pond we can't get them in, well, that's not going to work. But if you can get them in there, you won't have any mosquitoes.
So if they're in that pond, then that pond is no longer a viable breeding ground?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll just eat all the larvae, right?
Correct, yeah. So even if you do see like larvae and fish together, we've done this enough that we know that, oh yeah, they're going to get you eventually. So
And do they overwinter, these fish? If you stop the
Yeah.
pond, will you have a breeding population and you don't have to come back?
we've
Or
been tracking
you have
that
to
for
do
a
it every
while.
year?
We've been tracking that for a while. We have about a 30% recovery rate. So about 30% of the time they overwinter. So we still run our biocontrol programs to augment it because it's only 30%. So
Yeah, and you don't want to wait for the
Right.
population to
We should
recover.
just build the state.
yeah, we've talked about that, but you know, money is always a
You
touchy
should build a
subject.
prison, and I bet if you stop going, they would reconsider.
Yeah, we've been working on partner programs. So among those other things besides the fish programs, we were doing some on-site training with them to get them pesticide licenses, and then we're giving them larvicides, which is just the bacteria or the growth regulators that they can put in their little catch basins. And then we were also trying to work with them on like traps and stuff, so we put those mosquito magnets out there. So we're trying to figure something out for them, but it's like, it's a work in progress. It doesn't solve all the problems, and also mosquitoes are not the only thing they have out there. They've also got biting midges, and they've got horseflies and deerflies, and not everything we do for mosquitoes works on the other two. And so, I don't know if you guys have ever been around biting midges, but they really like your ear tips. And so you get out there and they don't want your ear tips, especially if you're fishing or something like that. You're just like batting them away. And they're mean biters.
Beekeeper veils.
Yeah.
That's how we fished in Alaska.
Yeah. No, it's worth it. It's
In
absolutely
your
worth it.
ears, up your nose.
Yeah. Yeah, so back to that cow suffocating.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions?
I have about 1 million questions. This is super fascinating.
Let's give you his email.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple cards, I think, so let me do that. Let me-
I'm so glad
Oh, I
you
have a
asked
question.
Sure.
The size of the capillaries
Yeah.
in the gel, why not go bigger? Is it
It's too big.
because it would dry out?
Yeah, so when we
Or-
were looking at the pore spacing within cotton, just a cotton ball that you spray out, it runs anywhere from like 80 to 150 micron. So mosquitoes super like it in that same ranges, but it's too close to the cotton, and we know that things like bees can easily get into the
Oh,
cotton.
so it's big enough for mosquitoes, but not.
Yeah,
big.
that's the hope.
They want it small enough that the bees won't be able to get into it.
Yeah. Not to say they don't like poke at it.
They would like to, because it's full of sugar, but
How did you measure if the bees got into it? Did you just weigh it before and after?
they die.
Well, so
the bees
so
are larger than mosquitoes, so maybe if they got the same, like a micron or whatever, microgram of the pesticide, it wouldn't kill them, but it would kill the mosquito.
yeah, so it's gonna sound weird, but we have something called a spectrophotometer. What that does is it flashes UV light on something and it pings back a response. And so what we can do is put a tracer dye in the pesticide. And if a bee died or something, I can actually take that bee out, grind it up, and run it through a spectrophotometer. And if I get a ping on the thing that I laced it with, this is a thing.
So
It's used in forensic technology a lot. So you may have heard of like invisible ink and like antagonists and stuff like that. That's exactly how they work.
Work on the varroa mite.
Yeah, they're not proved.
Please.
That is so.
But yeah, so
So
there
you really definitively know that the bees were not able.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
yeah, it's a lot of work.
A lot of time.
But it's
Yeah.
The
very
mites are so big, you can just see them with your
That's
eyeballs.
true, but I kind of think varroa mite's a little cute though, because they
No.
have their little suction
It is
cup thing
cute.
and they just
Have
like.
you seen them reproduce? Have you seen them inside a cell? It is gross.
Yeah,
Gross. It's
They're not
orgy-like, it's bad.
yeah, let me
She was the midwife, guys.
well,
See if I could get my presentation up. I'm gonna do it fast.
It's in the chest pocket.
I know, smart. Well, guys, judge me, okay?
Alright.
And my laptop's dead.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, can we
also
clap
really-
for Chris?
I got
'Cause
the-
that
couple cards, so. If you want to contact me at phone and email, does anybody else want to throw anyone?
Just
Okay.
take
So bird bath,
I have that.
should I have a bird bath? Because my bees feed out of my bird bath, but I think mosquitoes may hang out.
In your case, bird bath is fine.
can you put a fish in it?
I wish, no.
No,
So,
seriously, can you?
just as a caveat, blast out my email to them.
Yeah.
I ran out of cards, sorry.
was
Yeah,
okay.
so
I think they can take a picture of it if anybody has.
if you were living in a southern state, we have yellow fever mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti. Those will live in the bird bath. We do not have them here, so you're okay. That doesn't mean like don't ever clean your bird bath, but like you don't really have to worry about it here. That may change if we ever got that other mosquito, but for right now, it's okay.
Really cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. That was fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't know I could learn so much about mosquitoes.
You didn't know you wanted to.
I didn't know that.
All right, I'm gonna take my leave. Feel free to reach out to me. We actually do have an education program with us too, so we have like lots of people at our district that can help and show up to events and like help teach things. We can help with workshops and like whatever. So if there's anything you guys want from us, just let us know. Thanks. I'm Skedat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of that, Jordan, our secretary, works there too, at the Salt Lake City Mosquito Abatement. So he knows Jordan, and she is so fascinating. I wish she was here, because when she talks about bees and pollinators, it's like sparkle in her eye. It's like her favorite thing to talk about. Okay, so next month, Robert Stevens is gonna speak and just discuss his experience sharing about his master beekeeping. He's done 2 master beekeeping classes, so that will be in March. And then I'm gonna just try to go through this quickly here. someone remind me, do I go back arrow to go back?
Left or right?
Okay, here we go. So, on membership, this is a great resource for you guys. You guys get the guest speakers. You get to have mentors if you're a new beekeeper, or you can be a mentor to a mentee as a member. You get to vote, and then the swarm directory. So, is there anybody in here that's on the swarm directory that wants to catch swarms? Okay. So, just make sure that if that is something you're interested in, that you are a member, so that we can contact you. We currently only have 7 on our list. I think that the swarms this season probably won't be as great, but still exist, and among 7 people, that's not a lot of people. So we get called a lot for them, and they'll call other associations, but ultimately we end up getting the call, because no one will go out. So pass the message on, and then you get access to workshops, and then of course our honey contest and banquet. So that's the code for the application. There's one on your guys' table as well. It will ask about swarms and mentoring. Now Henry is the mentoring coordinator, and so his job is to just take your applications and pair you with someone in the same city, the same age, and do his best to make sure that you guys take it from there, and that you get as a mentee the help that you need. So there are some classes available. I listed some even if they are full. So the Homer's Honeybee Supplies, they're full. They offer in person and online. And then the Thriving Hives has ended from what I found online. But Peter Sommers will do them at Wheeler Farm. So you can do inspections with an inspector. And then there's always Desert Hive Supply. That's in Ogden, a little far, but the classes are only $20. And then the bees, hives, and honey are also pretty affordable, $30, and that's closer. That's just in downtown Salt Lake.
I don't know if he's selling this year or if he still does this, but I originally bought my bees from Pete, and I got that class included. So
Oh.
just
Yeah, that's good
I don't
to
know.
know.
Don't quote me, but Pete,
For the one downtown.
he's out on Third West now. He's our local inspector as well. He'll come out. And,
You're talking about Peter?
yeah.
Yeah, he's also I think one of the administrators on the Facebook page, so you just like search on the membership, you'll be able to message him. Or you can email him on the University of Utah website, it has his contact information. So this is some of the most important information. I know not everybody maybe does this, but it is important to register your hive with the UDAF because you get some benefits. So you get no charge for inspections, free testing, you get some health certifications, notifications about disease outbreaks, pest management, and then you get to be included in tracking the bee populations.
Is this different from your license?
I believe so, yes.
Can you go back to the previous?
This is part of the,
I think it is part of your license.
yeah, your
Is it?
$10.
Oh, so if I've done that.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
$10.
this is a
Okay.
much better deal than most other states have.
And if you haven't tested, if you're not licensed with them, it's like $75, but if you are licensed, it's free.
Okay, that's good information. So yeah, you pay, and I apologize, I haven't had my bees. Last year I didn't register them. So yes, you pay $10, you get your number, and then that should go on your hive box. That's the number? Okay, correct me if I'm wrong.
And it's $20, you have 20 hives, it's not much.
What do you do if they're gonna?
Compared to 75.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know, a lot of my bees died last year really early. So this would be a great option for someone who's like, why did they die? Did they starve? Was my neighbor sprayed them?
You have 30 days from the time you get your bees to get your license.
Okay, so that's why it's here, right? You guys are gonna start doing your installation and then you need to
Is
register.
that an annual fee?
Yes.
Is it the beekeeper that is registered and not the hive?
You
It's
can
the
register
same,
your
one and the same.
addresses.
I'm sorry?
Apiary addresses, you can register.
Yeah, the
It's
actual,
very
mean-
difficult.
Because, I mean, if your hives die over the winter and you have to get a whole bunch of new hives, you have to,
no, it's an annual fee for you. So if you have a
all right,
hive at one location, you're all right, you can have it at like 8 locations, different hives. Or you can move them from one location to another.
What's the
But if
difference
you give
between
them their-
registering and being licensed? What
It's
is,
the same thing.
Yeah, because you get a number.
If
You
you
get
give them
your
your address,
license number when you
They'll
register
warn you
your
of any
hive.
issues.
So the number goes to you, I think, as an
I
email.
have issues for.
So if they want your number on your number, your license number on your hive, and also like a name and a phone number, so if there's an issue, especially if your hive's not in your backyard, they can
Correct.
call you and say it's swarming, or,
Yeah,
just, your hive just carried out some kids, you better get out here.
that would be a sight to see. But yes, it's mainly for someone who it's not in your backyard, right? Or it's, maybe we have, for example, members who wanna offer up their land for someone to come and manage a hive. So that's something that's part of our application as well. We have a handful of people who live in an HOA or something and they can't have a hive. But then we have some old beekeepers that no longer keep bees, but they're like, sure, I can have 20. So in that sense, yeah, their hives would all be marked. Okay, now I wanted to ask Chris this, and maybe you guys can help educate me, but there's a no spray zone through the SLCMD, but he was saying in the city they're not spraying. So what, my question for him, I guess, and maybe you guys know, is why do we need to register for a no spray zone with the mosquito abatement?
I hear some people live outside of the city.
Yeah,
Okay, well, so for
It
them.
sucks, but
yeah.
they do it somehow.
So I guess this is applicable to the people whom are not within,
I think they
Where they
spray
spray.
our canal areas,
okay. I think we
but
need,
I
I need to ask
haven't
Chris.
known what the spray was, and now it could be only
Well,
water.
apparently it could be somebody else spraying, but that they can't control that. So I'll email him and then I'll put it in our newsletter as to why someone would register. So if you want, that's the QR code that goes to their entire objective about spraying, kind of what he talked about. And then at the very bottom of it is the form. They didn't have an online form and they didn't have any other method. It was just like fill this out, print it out type of thing. If you find a better one, definitely let me know. We talked about this. You have until the 3rd of March to leave your public comment. Okay, so this is on the House Bill 297. It just gives clear guidance of government setting hive limits. So it was really great when he came and talked about it. It didn't seem it was jeopardizing a beekeeper at all.
Yeah, no, it's the other way, it's protecting.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah, so I don't think it was of any concern. I have no public comment, but again, this goes directly to where you can leave a public comment. When I do click on it to leave the comment though, it does just have you email amber.mbrown@utah.gov. Otherwise, when you do scan it, you can see the PDF again of all the objectives and all of the rule changes. Okay, so now I'm gonna try to go as best I can here. So February, your bees are gonna die of starvation if you don't feed them. And brood rearing is happening towards the end of the month, which is right now. This is tricky to do because I have to do 2 months at a time because we're at the end of the month. But
Supposedly, though, if there's no pollen going in, they're not raising any of the brood yet.
But they like my chicken food, and they've got the pollen for my chicken food on it. and they're
well,
taking it
Nicole
in.
said that they have 3 different types of pollen that people are seeing now already being collected and taken in.
Willow and birch are the first.
The first,
Mine's gray in color, it's a gray color
huh.
pollen.
So I guess raise your hands if you have bees that are flying. Have you seen your bees?
I haven't seen any pollen
He
though.
laughs. What? My bees have passed away, guys, so I'm just
I know.
out there waiting for bees to just go in.
Get on
and
the
get
swarm
some
list.
free bees.
Get up, yeah, the swarm list.
Oh, I'm on there. Do I have a ladder? I'll get one if I need to catch
Yeah,
this
they're
one.
going crazy. This warm weather, it's pretty
That's what I was
bad.
thinking. I kept seeing videos on Facebook of all these people just like, look at my girls, and all these pretty videos of the bees flying,
Those
so.
are from last year.
They're lying. Is that what you're saying? You don't believe it. I felt pretty convinced. Okay, so they're eating a lot. You're gonna see that they're finding nectar and pollen, but ultimately just really quickly look and check them. Clear the entrance. When they're actively flying, check to make sure the bees are in there. Check that your queen is either laying or that she's gonna try not to swarm hopefully soon. And then keep feeding, keep feeding, keep feeding. Now last minute preparations, just make sure that you have all the equipment you need if you are queenless or your hive has died. Now is the time to order your bees. Now provide a water source. We would like to do a workshop on this. I'm sure everybody can just build
Is
their
that the
own.
bucket?
Well, we can do whatever one. We have like
Nicole
this
uses
terracotta
some
pot
bucket.
option where you wanna do a bucket one?
Well, I want her bucket plans.
Okay.
And she was not here tonight for me
To ask her. Yeah, she is in California, but we would love to do a workshop for this, so you should get some information soon from the program directors about what workshops we're doing, and this is gonna be one of them. Try not to let the bees go in your neighbor's yard. Do I have 2 of these?
That's one of the Salt Lake County regulations, is you have to have a clean water source.
I think they talked about that in the House bill.
Yeah.
Well, water.
It's number 1.
Yeah. Well, and I've been told and have learned you don't want it too close to your hive.
There's
Because wasps.
There's things on the internet, these little things that float right in your little, so you can have a terracotta pot or, base, and it's just like a frisbee, and you put it in there, and
Huh.
the bees can get on it, because one of my problems is I have rocks in there, but still they drown, and I just
Oh, I
can't, yeah, just
My
irritates
bees
me.
drown in the rocks too, even if it's just the
I think-
littlest bit of
I
water.
think the not too close thing is because their waggle dance where they give directions, it relies on there being some distance, like part of the dance is how far it is,
Oh, okay.
and if it's
Right
too
there.
close.
Right there.
Yeah,
They don't
go-
understand, they're
yeah,
like, I don't get your dance.
30, 40 feet from your hive.
Okay, good information. I'm gonna move my hive this year, I think. It's in one corner and I'm gonna put it on the other side and see how it
You
goes.
can put the water where it is now then.
Yes, I would put the water not over there. Maybe my bees died, I was thinking of this because my neighbor killed them. I hate to say that, but she's not been my most advocating
Did you
neighbor.
give her honey?
I did, yes, and
Well,
she was
she's a
very
jerk
happy.
then.
Well, I'm speculating, but we'll hope that that's not the case. So, just some helpful information from Richard Homer. So, preventative versus reactive beekeeping. He always just says educate yourself. I think that's the most important. And even though you use Google, make sure that you're verifying and validating the information you found. He does speak about 4 principles of beekeeping. Do you guys know what they are? Let's play a game.
Following your girls, that's the first part.
Okay, let's hear some more guesses. Let's just see what
They
we
don't
think.
wanna bother you, you don't, I don't know.
Let bees be bees.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I don't know if that's what
Let
he's
it be.
saying.
Yeah.
Okay, good guesses. Okay, so there's 4 principles that are just basically the overall look of what a good, informed, and successful beekeeper should know or have. So first principle is understanding bees, right, and their hive behavior, understand why things are done. There's a bee haver versus a beekeeper. I know, you've probably heard this, right? So you let bees do their thing, that's a haver, so you're kind of like chill, they'll figure it out. A keeper is someone who's going to learn what the honeybees need, how to read their behavior, which was mentioned, and give hive direction. And then he has a little, remember the species is a domesticated animal and that is not native to North America. Okay, so second principle, mite control. So understand your relationship between the bee and the mite, which chemicals are effective and when to use them. And then it's been recommended to read Randy Oliver's website, Scientific Beekeeping. Have any of you guys ever visited his site?
Oh, yeah. Not,
It's very like content heavy.
it's dense, yeah.
Yes, and it's not pretty by any means, but the data on it is definitely good to read. Make a plan, so integrate pest management, miticides.
At the meeting they had on Friday and Saturday, they said that Abatement is not effective and not use it.
I read that on Facebook, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I used after Labor Day. That was like my last treatment, and then my bees were dead by like Halloween.
It was like 2% effective.
Yeah, that's so not
Really?
good.
Yeah, it was just, yeah. It was
So when
just-
I read that, I was shocked, because so he's mentioning the Utah Beekeepers Association, they discussed that at their conference. And then if you're not on the Facebook page, there's tons of people who don't come to these meetings in there. There's 5,000 people, hopefully local to Utah, but they help to share some really really important information. So next month too, speaking of this, I have it in here, but Nicole is going to talk about oxalic acid. That's not something I'm super familiar with. I haven't used it more out of fear. But she's gonna kind of show you how to implement it, how to apply it.
It's the best.
That's what, yeah, I
It's
should
my
just
favorite.
Fear of what?
Get it?
What do you?
Fear of burning myself, I don't know.
They make
Oh, with a
books
vaporizer.
Well,
Not
I've seen
listening.
how it works. I've watched it a bunch of times on YouTube and I'm like, I could do that. And then I'm
It's
like,
like three,
There's
there's like,
There's
there's three different ways you can
vaporizer
smoke,
over-
so you don't have to smoke them with it.
it looks effective. A lot of people who use it, these survive.
The University of Montana used just one oxalic acid treatment, and they do a dribble
Yeah, that's what she
at
said.
late fall. And that's the only time they use it.
The one time. Oh, wow. That's my kind of treatment.
They may use other things, though, depending on their money counts.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so yes, Nicole is gonna talk about that, so if I hit those slides, I'll just skip them. Richard Homer said his third principle is hive management, so just resources and growth, managing mites, the nutrition, having an inspector on your side, so making sure you register your hive, how to identify capped brood, and then like smells of the hive. So it should smell good, like honey and propolis. And here's a little bit more on his hive management. So he says, watch your bees' behavior. You can tell the difference between new foragers, learning how to find their home in a lot of bees, and how are they going to swarm. Are your bees flying in a figure 8? Do they go out and fly back? How many bees per 60 seconds are bringing in pollen? So that was fascinating to me because I don't know how, do you guys count your bees going in? Because I don't think I ever have, but I will.
you get a feel for them though, when everybody's bringing it in, and it's like, oh.
They're classified as lots.
Right, I just say a lot, yeah, they're just like all have little pollen pockets. And then I'm like, okay, that's good. But within a minute, that would be fascinating information. And then, do you see any fighting? Do you see a bunch of diarrhea on the front of the hive, in your yard, on your furniture? And then hive resources, arranging in the hive, so needing space for brood and storing incoming resources. So hive management, third principle. And then the fourth principle is the queen management plan. So it's advised to replace your queen every year and watch brood laying pattern to determine the health of the queen. I would like to know, does everybody do this in here?
Never.
Is that a commercial
The
beekeeper
big
thing?
time speaker down, you know, at that convention or whatever,
Mhm.
and he has 30,000 hives.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, big time guy, he definitely, he re-queens every year.
But he's in Texas.
30,000
Yeah, he's-
queens,
yeah.
can you
So-
imagine?
He's in Texas.
But his winter is 2 months long.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
He doesn't have to worry about those.
and so in Texas, the queens lay a lot of eggs, so they run out of eggs.
Yes.
And so, you know, that's part of the problem, that's one of the reasons why you want to requeen.
I didn't know that happened.
If you send your bees to California, I worked for Jones Bees for a while, and went to California 2 times. And the bees that go there, they're laying eggs a lot.
Yeah.
You know, they're laying more eggs than if you just keep them here.
Right.
And,
So that's
and
an
so
interesting question,
we,
how many eggs can
we-
they lay?
we requeened all the time. When we'd bring them back,
So you just
if
squish
we,
yours, huh?
if we saw the queen in the old hive, we would pinch her and put a
Cage.
cage queen in there. And when we made splits and stuff, it's all
Do
a
it
bunch
too.
of work.
Okay, cause I'm like, I've never done that.
different deal if you're doing this for a living too.
Right, you're like, my sweet queen, why
Yeah,
do I wanna
as
kill
a
you?
hobbyist with like 2
Yeah.
hives, I'm not,
I guess to requeen, we have to be able to find the old one.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. And then I'm thinking, did I kill my queen when I was doing my treatment? And that's why my hive is dead, so. Never know. And so then it says here about requeening, if you replace after June 25th, a new queen will begin laying in August. Lots of eggs and adults going into winter and a strong laying queen in the following spring. So this is just advice from Richard Homer, but helpful. Now this is the OA mite treatment, so I'm gonna kind of skip them, but basically the most important thing is that this spring is so warm and the populations are increasing quickly, so treating for mites early is necessary.
Can you go back one, please?
You looking at my picture?
No, just the numbers don't add up, June 25th and August.
June,
If you
July,
requeen with a mated queen,
Yeah, they'll
You're gonna have-
hatch the next day.
3 weeks later, you'll be.
Yeah, so this is if you kill your queen and let them produce their own queen.
So is it too long of a timeline?
Yeah, so if you kill your queen and let them produce one,
Mhm.
then you'll get laying.
But that's as
You know,
if you replace.
I know, it
That
says
sounds like you
replace.
brought in a new one.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah, if you
the
replace
numbers
it,
aren't
it's
right.
just a couple days.
Let's call him.
You can do everything right.
Nicole took these notes from
Yes, you
the
can.
UBA's
Well,
conference in
you're guessing
2020.
today.
Oh,
I guess,
2020?
yeah, he was a speaker and she just felt like these
Define
were
the queen.
helpful, so she had
Yeah.
sent us some ideas.
No, yeah, I think it's just the word, the wording.
Yeah, and it, I mean, you're saying by July,
Oh, yeah.
so like.
If it's a mated
They're
queen,
monarchs, you
if
can
you
buy.
buy it from Man Lake or something in an emergency,
So it'd be sooner than August,
yeah,
essentially.
absolutely.
Much
It would
sooner.
be like less than a
And this
week.
is saying May and
As
August.
soon as
Okay.
she's accepted, she'll start laying.
Yeah.
Well, good for her. Well, treat your hives, guys. That's what these slides are about. And then she'll talk about what's needed. So pre-swarming, I don't know if we'll have too much of a problem with that, but it still could happen. Julie Arthur is the swarm coordinator, and basically when you contact our swarm hotline, you're going to reach Julie. You can text it or call it, leave a voicemail. I'm gonna try to help Julie this year so I can understand that, that portion of our association. I feel like 2 people in a role is always better than 1, just so you can get fresh eyes. And hopefully we can get some information and present it as far as how many swarms we've captured, where they are, try to maybe educate people in that area of splitting or preventing swarms to try to lower the number in that area. So pre-swarming behavior, you'll have a high population of bees in the hive, although swarms can occur no matter the bee population.
20%
20%
of hives will swarm for no reason.
regardless.
Regardless.
Fun fact, okay, 20% of all hives will swarm regardless of the reason or population. The whole width of the entrance is used. This is an indication that a swarm may happen. Bee frames within the hive are all fully drawn out. Brood frames are full of resources. The hive becomes louder. Workers rush through the frames making a vibration. Foraging activity temporarily stops or slows. The queen may shake and is sometimes shaken by other workers, and then the queen reduces her weight to prepare and fly.
They think it's congestion, though, is probably the #1 reason.
Crowding.
They're so crowded that the queen's pheromones do not get dispersed throughout the hives, and so,
They're like, really?
yes.
Okay, now
Or
these,
communication.
they're like, we can't talk, it's too tight in here. Okay, how to prevent a swarm. So to prevent bee swarming, you can provide enough space, ensure they have food, and just regularly inspect your hive. Use brood boxes and honey supers to accommodate the growth. Add 2 supers at a time.
Right? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, you can correct me.
No, I've
Did
just never
that-
heard that.
These are information I've got through research.
Cool.
So keep track of the hive's food, just ensure that there's constantly a food supply for brood growth and supplementally feed. Regularly inspect it, monitor your population and growth, look for signs of swarm such as queen cells. Take action promptly if you notice the queen cell, and then consider splitting. So just adding another box is common and easy practice. Or rotating a few brood frames so that the bees have to draw new comb. Okay, now what to do if you see your hive swarm? I came up with these solutions because it's hard to say. I mean, I would just try to get it. So, but hey, not everybody can do that. So just attempt to capture it. If you're confident in catching your swarm, I would say recommend that first. Install it into a new hive, or if you are using the same hive, just make adjustments to ensure they won't swarm again. If you're not familiar with how to capture a swarm, you can't just leave it there, so you're gonna either have to call a mentor if you have one, an experienced beekeeper, maybe your neighbor, or our swarm hotline or any other swarm hotline online, and someone will help. We say put a sign that says do not spray, beekeeper on the way, and if you,
Don't spray the beekeeper.
does it say that? Don't spray beekeeper. I'm like, I might have
Don't
typed
spray
that.
beekeeper, yeah.
Do not spray beekeeper on the way. I need a comma. Punctuation is very important. Hey guys, this was very hard to build. Okay. And if you need to leave this swarm, just make sure that yeah, nobody sprays it, and hopefully they don't leave. The swarm hotline number is there, and hopefully your swarm doesn't leave because they don't stay much. So if your hive has swarmed, just inspect your hive, make sure that there's no remaining queen cells, manage them, and then provide additional resources, so continue adding fresh frames to the foundation.
My understanding, if your hive swarms, a lot of times half the hive is still there.
That's what,
Yes.
yeah, I think it says something about this, is help the remaining bees rebuild.
Right.
Yeah, so try to figure out how to keep them in there and have them.
They actually have a pretty high success rate.
Yeah.
The bees that stay,
Yeah, the hive that is left.
so you just requeen it, or you
No,
let
they
them get
already
one.
have.
No, they have.
They already have one.
They already are growing a queen
Okay.
before they leave.
I've never had this happen
Yeah.
myself, so.
That's, last year I had, mistakes were made.
Okay.
And I
I
know
like your
that hives
style.
will swarm with a virgin queen. I had a single hive swarm 4 times.
Oh no.
That's,
And after the first time, I thought, well, they're done, right?
no,
No.
Not necessarily.
yeah, there's successions
Now
of
I know.
them, and their success rate gets less and less and less.
The hive
Yeah, that's,
was weak the
that's
rest of
not
the
a
year,
good
it was playing
scenario.
catch up.
Yeah, I read that your hive will still swarm again and again and again.
yeah.
That's sad, so.
So if you live in Montana, in May, you always put another box on your overwintered, and
Just-
that's their number one swarm prevention.
I love
It's
that.
just more room.
Just more room. Okay, again, I'm gonna harp on the fact that if you're not a member, you can't catch our swarms or any swarm reported, and we get swarms reported all over. And then you're unable to receive mentoring as well. So if you are a new beekeeper, having a mentor is important because your success is, pretty low if you're not sure what you're doing, if your hive swarms, about mite treatment, even just having someone to talk to keep yourself sane. Okay, newsletter, this is how we've been sending out all of our information. The YouTube video of our meeting is typically uploaded immediately, but we've had a discussion as a board that we're going to delay it like a week or so. We like to keep people to still come into the meetings, and by presenting it right away, why come, right? So in a couple weeks, you'll be able to rehash the mosquito abatement conversation, and that will be on YouTube. The dues are due, it's usually done in January. With the new form, a lot of people have not paid their dues, or they're waiting, and so it's kind of delaying the revenue for the association. So make sure that you get onto our website, pay your dues, fill out the form, get a mentor, catch a swarm. And then next month, you guys who are members will have voting rights to vote on the bylaws of committees. So we have not had an
When are we
agenda
gonna play with the hives out here?
end of April.
In the end of April?
Yeah, cause like,
Are they
are we
alive?
playing with our hives right now?
What?
No, we don't play with our hives yet, right? So we're definitely not gonna be like looking
Well,
in
you
there.
don't play with them, but hopefully you've opened them up to see if there's sugar reserves.
Yeah, Nicole is our apiary coordinator. I have titled everybody, so I wanna know what your job is. And so that's part of the bylaws, is like, we didn't have a mentor coordinator, we didn't have a youth beekeeper, we didn't have an education coordinator, so everybody's like, that's not my job. But now it is. Now it is your job, you know exactly what you're gonna do. So Nicole has been out there, one of her hives is actually out there, so she's invested, cause she's got her own hive.
That's actually a good plan.
Yeah, so there's 5 out there, 4 of which are ours, and then the 5th is Nicole's. And she checks them pretty regularly. Last we heard, they are alive, and they're out having the time of their lives.
Well, they're in a sunnier spot now, that probably helps too.
Yeah, so there's 2 in the shade, I noticed, that kind of stay
They
like
were
in it,
really in the shade back here though.
and then they had moved them.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen them until just maybe a few months ago, but I was thinking the same. I'm like, these poor 2 hives over here are just like freezing. But they were the ones that were out flying, even though they were in the shade.
What doesn't kill you makes you strong.
Yeah, so we're excited about them, but they are, they're out flying. She's feeding them, and I think she's our best advocate for taking care of them, so round of applause to her. But yeah, we'll just email the bylaws to you. Feel free to come in and vote. It's just basically saying this is what this person's job is. This is what they do with us, and why.
Do you see us moving to Wednesdays?
That's a good question. So part of why I had to move the meeting is I own a couple different businesses, and I took this role because I think I could run a meeting, essentially. And you'll find that I'm not a wonderful beekeeper, I'm not an expert.
But you will be, you will be.
But hey, with all my presentations, no, and I just love bees, so.
So is it gonna be Wednesday all the time?
I don't know, is it hard for you guys to get here?
Yes.
On
Yes.
Wednesday,
I feel bad to have changed it.
harder than Thursday.
So Thursdays are preferred. Okay. The challenge with that is no one else will do this job besides me. I've called on like the vice president and I've called on others. And a lot of them have said, you know, I'm not the president.
What about a co-president?
That is my vice president,
Oh.
Kevin Cook. That's him, that's his job. Now, he couldn't be here today because he had a death in his family, but I do think that he does plan to be supportive and be here, so I'm happy to like build the
But if you're the-
presentation and give it to him.
If you're the ringleader and you have to come on Wednesday, we'll come on Wednesday.
Well, I don't really want to do that to you guys at the end of the day. This is the challenge, so I own a cheerleading gym, and it's a nonprofit, and I'm the only person that runs it. So if I'm absent,
What if
the
we meet
program
there?
doesn't happen.
We can bring bees.
Just come to my cheer practice. And so I bring this up because it's on Thursdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So not only am I missing it in the beginning of the month for our board meetings, I'm also missing it at the end of the month, which is only giving me 6 out of 9 opportunities to be
She's
with them.
asking a lot of you.
Maybe. And I felt the effect of that like through December and January, and now that it's February, I'm like, whew, this is getting to be a little hard. With that in mind though, during the summer with all the fun stuff happening with bees is my gym is not open. So my gym is closed like June, July, August. So if I could just tough it out for a little bit, then I'll be in the clear.
What if we do Wednesdays when your gym is open and Thursdays when it's not?
I was thinking that, but how inconsistent. I'm a person of like structure. I want
No,
it to
but
be
if you're
on the same
letting us
page.
know online, if you're letting us know in the website that, hey, these 3 months it's gonna be Wednesday, we'll do it.
Well, thank you. And we do record it. Dean does an excellent job. It is on YouTube. So I know being in person, I love that. That's why we have them. I hate to see a decrease. And the room is not as full today, obviously. And it was delayed notice. I told you 5 days ago. I had to change it. I tried to stay
It might
the
have been the
same.
same number here Thursday though, you never know.
Well, they missed out on Chris's presentation because that was
That was
super
good.
fascinating.
That was good.
I loved that, yeah. Okay, so if it's something that you guys are willing to accommodate, and I do apologize to those who can't, I would like to keep it on Wednesdays. The board will have to vote on that, so it's not my decision. And we're meeting a couple weeks into March. So once we do decide, we'll send it out and we can pre-schedule the dates for the rest of the calendar year. So I think that will be helpful where you can say, I can be there or I can't. And then of course we want to support you that they are on YouTube. And it will be the full presentation. Hopefully you can hear the questions and comments on there.
So FYI, the way that this sounds, it's quiet when everyone talks quiet, but because I'm using a microphone here, we can actually hear everybody's questions. When I did it last month, we couldn't hear the questions, but I had the lapel mic on. We could hear her really well, but then you couldn't hear the questions and answers. So I'm hoping that this is a better balance. If it's not, we need to find another solution so that we can actually hear the content of questions and answers.
We
The
could do
question
that.
and the answer, so. you
Right.
know.
You're speaking loudly, others have spoken quietly. When the presentation was going on, we had a comment that it was quiet. So, and then extraneous noises can also affect it. So,
We'll do our best.
Yeah,
I
I
can
know.
try to
That's
put
all
it in
we
the
do.
comments too. When I upload it to YouTube, I'll secretariat. What's it?
When you consider moving to Wednesdays, would it be possible to consider, if you do move to Wednesdays, move to a different week number instead of the 4th, maybe a first, second, or
Yeah.
third?
I'm open to whatever brings people here. I could do Monday, I could do Wednesday, I could do Friday. Fridays are awkward. People don't want to come to a meeting on a Friday. Like, they don't want to come to cheer practice on Friday either. So Wednesdays are best. I think we get more of a variety of our board is available that day too. And I think end of month was just kind of like far enough away from the board meeting that it made sense. So I'll propose it to the board of, maybe we do it the 3rd week. But again, I'm really tossing it up now. Now I'm like, okay, now it's not the 4th week, now it's the 3rd week, now it's Wednesday. So the less changed, the better. And maybe we send out a poll to our membership. We have over 560 emails in our newsletter, and we get about a 50 to 60% open rate. So it's been really nice to know people are actually opening it. And then when we put a poll in there, they can vote. And if you don't vote, then you don't get to say. So, but yeah, if we can just kind of talk about that as a board, then we'll let you guys know. And hopefully it can stay relatively the same. And make it work.
Good.
Or maybe your poll will find out people are just eager for something.
Well, thank you.
Maybe we want two things. Yes. Thank
You're
you
doing a
guys
great
so
job.
much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, guys. I only was the president because I didn't want to see that nobody was the president. It matters so much to people.
Take an empty box,
Okay.
put it in the old place.
I appreciate it.
Old place of
Oh,
the.
thank you.
And this really helped me bring my chair back.
have to move
it around, oh, you're-
put a box there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was super fun. We did have a
Fine,
few
but
people
you're
that-